They told the world he set himself on fire, inside a locked holding cell, while tied up, using a lighter no one saw, on a mattress designed not to burn. And even now, almost 2 decades later, the official story hasn't changed. But the truth has a habit of leaking through the cracks, and in the case of Orejalo, a refugee from Guinea, what leaked out wasn't just smoke from a fire. It was a trail of contradictions, silence, and 3 dead men in the same room. This is the story of Room 5 at the Dessau police station in Germany, and of the 3rd body that left it in ashes. On January 7th, 2005, Orejalo was arrested for allegedly harassing sanitation workers while intoxicated. He was brought to the Dessau station, searched, restrained by the wrists and ankles, and left alone in Room 5, a supposedly fireproof cell already carrying a history of unexplained deaths. Police claimed he was aggressive, that he banged his head, and that he was put there for his own safety. Later that evening, they said the fire alarm went off. They claimed smoke poured out from under the cell door. They claimed they heard him shouting. But by the time they unlocked the door, Orejalo was on fire, the mattress half destroyed, the air thick with toxic smoke, and the man, according to their statement, was still alive, briefly. They said he had hidden a lighter during intake. They said he tore open the mattress with his hands and lit it. They said the fire was self-inflicted. But he was still tied up, hands and feet. He never made it to trial. He never made it out of the room. And that was the end of it. Except it wasn't. Because the cracks started showing immediately. The mattress, supposed to be fireproof, designed not to ignite without sustained flame or accelerant. The lighter, found the next day, melted but intact, not exploded as expected in a fire hot enough to burn human flesh. The fire damage, experts later confirmed the intensity could not be replicated under controlled tests using only a lighter. The footage from the cell, missing. The logs, altered. And the officers on duty, already tied to not 1, but 2 earlier deaths in the same cell. In 1997, Hans-Jürgen Rose died there of internal bleeding. In 2002, Mario Bichtemann died there of a fractured skull. And in 2005, Orejalo died in flames. 3 bodies, 1 room, 1 station. Still open, still used, still defended by the state. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's a pattern. And when a story breaks in exactly the same way 3 times and no one answers for it, you don't have a question, you have a cover-up. In the next part, we look at what the forensic teams found, what the independent experts exposed, and why science, logic, and human anatomy all point to a story the police never wanted told. Key, and reduce a restrained man to ash. But somehow, in Room 5, that's exactly what police said happened. And when the mattress was removed from the crime scene and destroyed, before any independent testing could be done, the only remaining explanation was a single melted plastic lighter. No accelerants found, no evidence of flammable liquids spilled, just the claim that a restrained man, whose hands were cuffed and feet bound, not only tore open industrial foam, but used a lighter smuggled past multiple searches to start a blaze so aggressive it blackened the ceiling, cracked the tile, and set off alarms 2 floors above. Fire experts later tried to replicate the conditions. They used the same mattress model. They placed a restrained dummy in the room. They used a lighter. And again. And again. The result? Nothing. Smoke, yes. But no flame. No black carbon burn marks. No raging inferno like the one captured in the post-incident photos. The conclusion from the fire lab? This fire was not naturally sustained. It required an accelerant, something like gasoline, and yet there was no mention of any smell. No fire investigation report looking for chemical residue. No dogs. No flame spread analysis. Just a narrative tied together by a melted lighter that forensic specialists said should have exploded under the fire's heat, but didn't. That's not forensics. That's fiction. And it wasn't the only detail that didn't make sense. Origialo's body showed third-degree burns, but the autopsy from independent pathologists revealed something even more damning. No carbon monoxide in his lungs. If you die in a fire, your lungs are filled with soot and gas. You choke before you burn. But Origialo's lungs were clean, which means he was likely already dead before the flames touched him. What else did they find? Skull fractures, blunt trauma to the head and face, consistent with a beating, not a fire, not a fall, but trauma inflicted while restrained. Add to that the strange testimony of another officer on duty, who later revealed under oath that he saw two colleagues, Officers Hans and Andreas, enter room 5 shortly before the fire started, contradicting their alibis. Those two officers, the same ones present during the previous deaths in room 5. It was as if history wasn't just repeating. It was being recycled, over and over. The camera feed, of course, was reportedly malfunctioning that day. Logs didn't show anything unusual, because the logs, like the evidence, were later revealed to have been altered. Pages missing, timestamps misaligned, officers contradicting each other. One even admitted they waited several minutes before opening the cell, despite smoke alarms going off and screams reported by neighbours. This wasn't chaos. It was control, a control over truth, over time, over the ability to rewrite death as misbehaviour. When fire can erase evidence and silence is used to replace accountability, you don't get justice, you get theatre. And in this play, the victim had no lines. In the next part, we pull back the curtain further to reveal what had happened in room 5 before. Because Origialo was not the first man to die there. He was the third. And that cell has a history written in bruises, blood, and bureaucratic denial. Room 5 wasn't born a symbol. It became one through repetition, through patterns too precise to be dismissed as coincidence, and through deaths that occurred under the same roof, under the same excuses, with the same faces walking free. And long before Origialo ever crossed the threshold of that concrete box, two men had already died there, and the warnings had already been ignored. The first was Hans-Jürgen Rose, a 36-year-old man picked up by police in 1997 for alleged public intoxication. He was detained, placed in room 5, and the next morning, he was dead. The official cause: internal bleeding. The claimed reason: an accidental fall. But the medical report told a different story. Massive abdominal trauma, injuries so severe that they resembled those from repeated blunt force, not a stumble. His body bore the signs of violence. No camera footage existed. No witness testimony ever surfaced. The officers said he fell. The system said, case closed. Then came Mario Bichtermann in 2002, also 36, also arrested for public disturbance, also placed in room 5. He had a documented neurological condition, was on medication, and a paramedic on duty that day reportedly warned police that he needed hospital treatment, not jail. They ignored it. Hours later, he too was dead. This time, the cause was listed as a fractured skull. The story again? He fell from the bench, but the fracture was to the back of the head, in a straight line, not jagged, consistent with a blow, not a tumble. Again, no charges, no independent inquiry, no procedural changes, just another name buried beneath bureaucracy. And now, in 2005, it was Origialo. 3 deaths, same cell, same station, same excuses. But even worse, same officer. Andreas S. was on duty during all 3 deaths. He filed reports, he gave testimony, he signed off on statements that contradicted others, and he walked away untouched each time. When Orejalo died, he was finally brought to trial. Not for murder, not for abuse of power, but for negligence, for failing to act fast enough during the fire, for failing to prevent a death that his department claimed was self-inflicted. And yet, even then, the court acquitted him. The evidence wasn't strong enough, they said. The inconsistencies were not proof, and besides, the fire was ruled accidental. A fluke, the third one, 3 men, 3 accidents. But only one room, only one set of hands writing the reports, and only one outcome, no accountability. In any other profession, 3 dead clients would prompt investigations, policy changes, consequences. In this one, it prompted silence. What does it mean when the same tragedy repeats and no one is held responsible? It means the story isn't just about individuals, it's about a structure that protects itself. And when a room holds that many secrets, maybe it should never be used again. But room 5 still stands, still holds detainees, still waits. In the next part, we enter the courtroom where Orejalo's death was put on trial, not to seek truth, but to bury it in legal dust, delayed justice, and a verdict that changed nothing. When the case of Orejalo's death finally reached a courtroom, it should have been the moment everything changed, the day evidence spoke louder than silence, the day lies unravelled, and the system finally said, enough. But what unfolded instead was a trial that seemed built not to discover the truth, but to deny it, to blur it with technicalities, to smother it under the weight of missing files, faulty memories, and institutional indifference. And by the time the verdict came down, it was clear that the court had not delivered justice. It had only confirmed its absence. 2 officers stood trial, Hans-Ulrich M. and Andreas S., the latter having been present during the previous 2 deaths in room 5, and yet neither was charged with murder or even manslaughter. The charges, negligent homicide, the accusation, that they failed to respond quickly to the fire alarm, failed to check on Orejalo in time, and failed to prevent a preventable death. But this framing was already flawed. It accepted the police version of the event as the starting point, that Orejalo caused the fire himself. And once you accept that, negligence becomes a matter of delay, not intent. The trial began in 2007. It dragged on. Testimonies were vague. Key surveillance footage was unavailable. The mattress, the central piece of physical evidence, had been destroyed. The lighter was never independently tested, and even forensic reports showing skull fractures and no carbon monoxide in Orejalo's lungs were brushed aside as inconclusive. Several officers gave conflicting testimonies. One changed his account mid-trial. Another admitted that the fire alarm had gone off for several minutes before anyone reacted. And then there was the officer who stated, under oath, that he had seen Andreas S. and Hans entering room 5 shortly before the fire. That should have changed everything. But it didn't, because the court ruled that the timeline was unclear, that the memory could be unreliable, that no direct connection could be proven beyond doubt. In legal terms, reasonable doubt prevailed. But in moral terms, the courtroom became a graveyard for facts. The trial concluded in 2012, 7 years after the fire, with both officers acquitted. The verdict, not enough evidence. Andreas S., who had stood at the centre of 3 separate deaths in the same cell, walked free again. And if that weren't enough, he was retried in 2017, not for the death, but for allegedly lying in court, and was acquitted again. Not because he told the truth, but because the system had lost all memory of what truth even looked like. Meanwhile, Orejalo's family received no apology, no restitution. They were not informed of the verdict until long after it was delivered. In their world, the justice system never showed up. It only sent paperwork. Outside the courtroom, human rights groups protested. The press briefly reignited the story. A documentary was released. But like all fires left unattended, the outrage burned out, and Room 5 remained intact, still in use, still without accountability. This trial wasn't about proving guilt. It was about surviving scrutiny. And in that regard, the system did exactly what it was designed to do: protect itself, even at the cost of memory, morality, and a young man's life. In the final part, we ask the only question that remains: what happens when justice fails not by mistake, but by design? And what does Room 5 mean for those who still believe in truth? By the time the final gavel dropped, by the time the officers walked free and the press faded and the candles burned down, Room 5 was still there, not as a crime scene, not as a memorial, but as a functioning, silent cell in a police station that never closed. And if the system wanted us to forget, it almost succeeded. But memory doesn't fade where grief survives. And the story of Orejalo, like the stories of Hans and Mario, became something more than tragedy. It became a mirror. After the verdict, the Deso police station was quietly refurbished. The walls were repainted. The number on the door was changed. But the architecture remained. The building remained. And so did the room. Room 5, rebranded, reopened. Still used for holding detainees. No plaque, no internal investigation published. No statement from the department acknowledging the loss of life. Just a quiet erasure, as if those 3 men had never existed. But outside that building, outside the town where too many people learned too late what justice costs, people remembered. Human rights organizations continued to cite the Dessau case as a symbol of institutional racism and police impunity in Germany. Activists held vigils, wrote op-eds, staged demonstrations. A documentary titled Dead in a Cell was released in 2006, earning international acclaim and reigniting discussion. But the discussion, like most outrage, was temporary. It never led to sweeping reform. There were no laws passed in Orejalo's name. No new oversight body created to police the police. And for every headline about his death, there were 2 more calling it complicated or unclear. Because when power writes the narrative, even murder can be translated into mistake. And when institutions defend themselves instead of the people they serve, truth becomes collateral. The German government never issued a formal apology. There was no monument, no compensation paid to the family. Just one more coffin, one more lost file, and one more room waiting to be used again. So why tell this story? Why revisit the pain? Because stories like Orejalo's don't end when the fire goes out. They echo, they instruct, they warn. They show us what happens when systems are designed not to protect the vulnerable, but to shield the powerful. They remind us that justice is not inevitable, it must be demanded, that silence is not neutral, it's complicit, and that some rooms, no matter how thoroughly cleaned or renumbered, never stop holding ghosts. Room 5 is not just a place, it's a symbol of unspoken violence, of rewritten truth, of lives discarded behind institutional doors. But it's also a reminder, because as long as we remember Orejalo, as long as we speak the names of those who died in that cell, as long as we keep the record open even when the system tries to shut it, then Room 5 is not closed. Not yet. Not for good.